before the Ukraine conflict started. So it was in January of 2022 that a friend of mine and we dedicated ourselves full time to ideating and to researching in the clean energy space. But it wasn't set in stone what exactly we were going to do within the clean energy space. And the clean energy space is quite broad. There's a lot of different things that you can do. There's a lot of opportunities.
Hello everyone. Today I'm speaking with David Budde. So I'm very pleased to welcome him on my podcast. Hello David, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Prasanna.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting my request to be on my podcast. So let's start with your academic background. Can you please tell about your study background?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, when I graduated from high school back in the day here in Berlin, I wasn't really quite sure whether I wanted to go into business management or into law. And a friend of mine, or a friend of my brother's, actually an entrepreneur back in the day at that time, he suggested I try a startup internship. And so that's what I did. And when I started working with Anna Alex, who would now later become one of our business angels, I instantly recognized that business management is what I wanted to do and that eventually I wanted to found a company of my own. So I decided to actually proceed to study business management. And here in Germany, if you want to study business management with the intention of later founding a company, most people would suggest you go to WHU for your undergraduate program, which is what I proceeded to do. So I started at WHU as a bachelor student in international management in 2013. And that is essentially where I started my academic career. At WHU, I recognized that both consulting is interesting, but I still had that dream of becoming an entrepreneur at some day. And after I graduated from high school, after I graduated from WHU, I moved back to Berlin with a friend that I had met at WHU, and we worked on a food tech startup for a few months. Then at some point, we realized that's not what we wanted to do, and I stopped doing that. I'm pretty glad about doing that nowadays. And I worked for wefox for a few months, helped build the One Insurance brand there. And then I proceeded to go to ESADE and study business analytics because I recognized that I was really glad about my management studies, but I did want to develop more into the technical direction. I had always enjoyed working with tech teams and working on product management, and I figured it would be better for my later career as an entrepreneur to develop more technical skills. So I enrolled in the ESADE Business Analytics Master's Program combined with a double degree SEMS program. And I did that from 2017 until the end of 2018 before I moved back to Berlin.
So why did you decide that you wanted to start a company instead of going for a job or something else? So what inspires you to become an entrepreneur?
I've wanted to become an entrepreneur ever since my first internship, where I had the where I had the chance of working with Anna Alex, who would proceed to become the founder of Outfittery and Planetly. I liked about it that it's so broad and diverse in terms of what you're working on as a founder. You're never really doing the same thing. There are a lot of challenges in your everyday life, but also from a strategic and long-term point of view. I really loved working with people a lot, and this idea of working on something for my own building, for myself, building something that I would potentially benefit on later on if it actually works out, that was always intriguing. And I just thought about it as a really tough challenge and as a challenge that is going to be really fun. So that was always something that I had in the back of my mind. It wasn't like I I wanted to do it above everything else. I could obviously foresee myself pursuing a career, a regular career as an employee as well, but it was always my wish because I just simply thought it was so challenging and inspiring to do.
And you also work as a business strategy consultant for some years in Bain Company, right? So, what did you learn during the time that helps you to start a company? What kind of competences you acquired? Yeah.
So actually, I'm a firm believer that working as a management consultant for a few years is really beneficial if you want to become an entrepreneur. There are a lot of people that say consultants don't necessarily make great entrepreneurs, but then again, especially here in Germany, there are a lot of great entrepreneurs that have a background in consulting. I think there are a lot of competencies that you gather as a management consultant that can later on help you in as an entrepreneur. So one of the things that immediately comes to mind is how to very quickly gather knowledge in a domain that you're potentially not familiar with. You gather the self confidence and a certain way of working that can help you present towards investors, that can help you present towards potential clients, that can help you hire a team. So there are these skills about how you present yourself, how you present your knowledge. Those are very beneficial as an entrepreneur. And very glad that I had that experience and that I was able to gather those competencies.
And during your master's program in Spain, uh, did you get any opportunity to discuss your business idea to some of your colleagues or your academic professors, and how it actually evolved your business idea?
Back when I was in my master's degree in 2018, I wasn't yet working on what we are now doing with Trawa. Back then, I did have a bunch of different ideas, and there was more than enough space to discuss those ideas because we had a lot of classes centered around entrepreneurship, and there were a lot of opportunities to discuss and get great feedback. So that was really beneficial. But what we are now doing with Trava is not something that we were already working on back then.
Why energy companies at this point? Because of this situation going on in Europe, or you have this kind of idea before this war situation?
Trava, we're trying to solve the energy procurement problem for companies that are not yet enterprise size. The energy procurement industry hasn't really changed that much over the last 20 years. In Germany, we have a liberalized energy market, so companies, just like households, can decide where and how they want to buy electricity. But electricity procurement was never really a priority topic for companies, even for the ones that spend quite a lot of money on electricity. But that did change last year when the energy crisis happened as a consequence of the Ukraine conflict. The energy crisis had started before that. It wasn't as stable as it was many years before. But when the energy crisis of 2022 happened, a lot of companies started really struggling financially because their existing contracts ran out and then they had to get new ones, but those were sometimes 3 to 4 times more expensive than previously. And if your company is in the manufacturing segment, for example, energy costs can really make a difference. So that hurt a lot of companies. And it was at that time that we were doing a lot of expert calls, speaking to a lot of potential customers. And we developed the idea for a new type of intelligent and data driven energy utility company that bases its concept and its procurement approach on connecting companies to renewable power plants, such as wind and solar parks. And that is going to help these companies both decarbonize and become more sustainable in their operation, but at the same time improving from an economic point of view. So potentially saving cost and protecting themselves against future increases in electricity cost.
Right, right. And how many people are actually working on your business idea on the early stage of your startup company?
Well, we were working on finding an idea and an opportunity in the climate tech space before the Ukraine conflict started. So it was in January of 2022 that a friend of mine and we dedicated ourselves full time to ideating and to researching in the clean energy space. But it wasn't set in stone what exactly we were going to do in the within the clean energy space. And the clean energy space is quite broad. There's a lot of different things that you can do. There's a lot of opportunities. Very early on in our journey, we decided that we were going to focus on B2B opportunities because that is what we had known in our previous career as management consultants. We had gathered the competencies to speak to senior executives much more than to speaking to consumers. And for example, we're not too familiar with performance market marketing. Those weren't necessarily the areas that we had knowledge in. But B2B sales or B2B competencies in general were more what we were looking for. So we were interested in what are current needs and problems that companies are facing within the realm of energy solutions. And so that's when we started researching, and that was before the Ukraine conflict started. But then, of course, once the conflict and the resulting energy crisis really got rolling, the focus of the conversations that we are having in this space quickly switched and shifted towards the problem of how do I get stable and affordable electricity, and ideally how can I do so in a sustainable way. And that's when we really started to wrap our head around the opportunity that we're now working on.
Right, right. And how many people are actually working on your business idea on the early stage of your startup company?
Yeah, we're still a pretty young company. We've only been around for a few months. We've recently, in the beginning of the year, closed our pre-seed funding, and at the moment we're 7 people. We're going to be roughly 9 within the next few weeks, and we're not going to grow gigantically from a headcount point of view over the course of the next few months. We're going to focus on staying a high quality but relatively small team until potentially the next financing round, when we will then grow the team to really scale the operation and the sales processes. But for the next few months, when we're really still working on developing the product and working with our first customers, that's where we're still going to stay a rather small team.
Right, right. So, little more question about the team again. How did you choose these people to work with you? So, what kind of promise you gave them? Why these people came together to work with you? So, what is the main motivation?
Yeah. So maybe I can talk a little bit more about the founding team. I eventually got together with two great people, with Robert and Max. Robert has a similar-ish background to myself. He is also a management consultant by training who has an academic background in business management, and then we met in our master's degree at ESADE. He had previously also studied at HEC. So it was quite similar, but we did have different interests and also different competencies, and character wise, I think we also make a great fit. And we had befriended ourselves, but worked also together as part of our master's program. And then he proceeded to work at the Boston Consulting Group for a few years before he then joined Getier's Germany expansion team in 2021 or 2020 and in 2021, and worked there for a few months during that hyper growth phase at Getier. So I was able to really gather some great skills. And I had known that he was always also curious about the idea of founding a company. Max is a totally different story. Max is a software developer by training. He did a master's degree in specialized machine learning and then worked at the analytics branch of the Boston Consulting Group at BCG Gamma for a few years, working on machine learning and optimization forecasts. And with him, I had known him since we were teenagers. I had met him back here in Berlin, and then I had, always followed his moves, what he was doing, what he was studying, and then I also obviously thought it was super interesting what he was doing at BCG Gamma. And then last year, when I was looking for a team to tackle this climate tech challenge that I was researching in, I was speaking to Robert, I was starting to speak to Max, and at some point I realized it would just make a great team if we all three come together. So I'd introduced them, and then essentially we just kicked it off from there. You had asked about essentially, what I told them. I think the founding team, Max and Robert, there wasn't that much convincing necessary, because both of them, just like myself, were really interested and curious about the idea of building something of our own. We're interested in the challenge, really wanted to build something that could have an impact. And I think they recognized that we three as a team could really have some great, complementary qualities and skills, and that there's a lot of opportunities to be tackled in this trio. With the first hires now that we recruited, it's obviously a different story. I think the hires that we were able to have to convince to join our team, I think they see a lot of potential in the business opportunity that we're working on. I think they are really excited about the idea and the chance to join a very young team, which doesn't happen too often, right? I mean, it's easy to find a company that has 50 plus employees, that has 100 plus employees, but to really be one of the first few employees in a sector that is something that you care about, that you're passionate about, with a team that you believe in, that's a rare opportunity. And I believe the employees that now joined our team, they're just excited about being there from day one, about seeing everything that comes together, about seeing how the vision starts to become more tangible, and to really grow from idea to a company.
Right, right. Yeah. And you also mentioned that you worked for several startup companies before. Can you please highlight some of challenges that you faced during that time?
Yeah, definitely. So I had the chance of working for a few very different startups. The first startup experience I ever had was my first real work experience. That was after I graduated from high school, where I worked for Outfittery, which is a curated shopping e-commerce company that is still around, and that was in 2012. And back then the challenge essentially was, what what benefit can I really bring to the company, right? I was 18, I think I turned 19 when I was there as an intern, and I very quickly realized that I had a passion, but also apparently some skills for the for the intersection between business and tech. So I was working as a product manager, and I was working on a lot of Salesforce automation and improving a lot of processes. That was just the time that I recognized that even if you don't yet have a lot of skills, you can actually teach yourself a lot of things and really have benefit and really add to the team in an early stage startup. Then I proceeded to join Deindia in Switzerland, which is kind of the Swiss version of Groupon. So that was also e-commerce, but in a totally different industry. And also there, I worked on topics that you could describe as product management and operational improvement projects. Also, again, very closely working with different IT people. I think a really interesting challenge to talk about is my experience at wefox a few years later after I graduated from WU in my undergrad. I worked there for roughly 6 months and I joined the One Insurance team, which was a project that was working on the first end-to-end digital insurance product in Germany. It was a little bit similar to what Lemonade had been building in the US, but it was household and private liability insurance, end-to-end digital, even including a digital signature. And I was working with different teams there, with tech, with design, and with operations and legal even, to really cast and sculpt that end-to-end onboarding and customer experience process. So again, working at the intersection between tech, product, business, and that was a challenge because no one had ever done such a fully digital process in insurance, and insurance is usually something that customers don't really want to engage with. So to really think about all those processes and how those different functional teams can come together, that was quite challenging, but I do believe that we actually built a great product during that time.
Yeah. While developing your idea, Trawa business idea, do you think that it is really necessary to discuss with field experts or consultants about your idea? If you really did that, does it really help?
Yeah, so essentially speaking to people within the industry and potential customers is probably the most valuable thing that we did and that I would recommend to most starting entrepreneurs at the beginning of their journey, because at the beginning everything starts with the sense that there might be a problem here, that there might be an underlying opportunity, and then the second stage is you develop some kind of an idea of what a solution could look like, but you're still really trying to wrap your head around what is happening in this industry. Potentially, you've worked in the industry before and you have a lot of knowledge. That is obviously fantastic. But for a lot of people, that's not always the case. And if you have the ability to connect with a lot of experts or people that work in that industry that have some insights with potential customers that are willing to talk about what they are experiencing, what they are struggling with, that is incredibly valuable because it helps you see what the inside perspective on this is, what the actual experts think. There are obviously some challenges, right? First of all, it's super challenging to actually find these people, super challenging to identify them, but then also to convince them to give you time. I think that's something that we did quite well. We just really went from one contact to the next. We started asking for introductions. We leveraged all the network that we were able to establish in our times at the Boston Consulting Group, but also at Bain, but also in our academic network, our personal network. Essentially, anyone who had any sort of knowledge in the energy space, we contacted them. We asked to speak to them. We asked for them to make us an introduction to someone else that they knew. I think that is extremely valuable. But then there are also other challenges that you need to be aware of. One important thing that you can point out as well here is people don't always think outside the box, especially if they've been in the industry for a long time. Then they are skeptical, and I think that's really helpful, and I think that's valuable. But at the end of the day, you also need to consider that just because they believe it can't be done, or just because they never really considered something as an issue, doesn't necessarily mean it's not an issue or it can't be done, right? So you need to understand what they're saying. You need to consider it. You need to write it down, reflect upon it, assess the risks that they might be right, but you need to also be brave enough to consider at some point that might not be true, or that there might not be that one single source of truth, or not overweigh one person's opinion when you're in the process of ideating, because it's always really easy to find a reason not to do something or not to pursue something, but it's much tougher to develop the conviction to actually spend a year or many years of your time trying to do something. And then if people go around that you actually believe are experts and they tell you it can't be done or it shouldn't be done, then obviously that can be very demotivating and you shouldn't put too much emphasis on that.
Right, right, right. That's very interesting. So, Can you give a couple of examples while discussing with your potential customers about your business idea? What was their main concerns about your idea?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the process, we didn't really yet have the exact solution presentable, right? We were still in the process of understanding the problem, which is always the first thing to do. I think for a lot of the customers, not even they really understood what the solution would look like. All right. The customers don't always know what the solution can look like, but they can tell you what they're struggling with. And so that's something that we definitely did. I think one of the very interesting anecdotes when it comes to energy procurement in our actual situation was that we were speaking to customers, and a lot of them told us, listen, guys, energy procurement was always a priority C topic. And then all of a sudden in 2022, due to the energy crisis, it became the strategic priority, and it became this A list priority for C levels in all types of companies, especially the ones that are energy heavy. And a lot of energy procurers or even procurement professionals in general, and even managing directors of companies, for the first time ever had to really wrap their head around how energy procurement can and should be done. And so that is one of the things that we quickly learned, and that was one of the challenges that they shared. Where do they even begin? They had never really thought about energy procurement. So that was one of the things that we learned that was interesting. And so that's where we also developed the idea of having to become this end-to-end provider that can help go from customer education to actually fulfilling their needs with our solution.
Since you are working on sustainable and green renewable energy, so at this moment, the situation in Europe in energy sector is quite complicated and very complex. So, and the government is really pushing all companies to go more forward to renewable and sources. So, in that situation, did you get any kind of support from the regional government or national government since you are working in the same line?
Well, no specific support so far. I mean, one thing in terms of support that I can mention is there are some subsidies and some programs for potential equity-free investments that the German government has that support companies in the climate tech space, but also just tech companies in general. That doesn't necessarily have to do with the push towards more sustainability. I do, however, believe that the fact that we're enforcing more and more sustainable behavior, and that that regulators, not just locally in Germany or in Berlin, but also on a European level, the European Commission, for example, that they are pushing companies more towards decarbonization and sustainability, obviously creates massive tailwinds for our entire business opportunity and our entire business model. And I really do believe that if companies weren't pushed towards this direction, that a lot of them would not necessarily take these steps. We were actually quite surprised to learn that a lot of companies seem to really be sincerely motivated to decarbonize and to become carbon neutral by example 2030. But if it wasn't for this regulatory tailwind, I think a lot of companies would be more careful, more prudent, more slow in considering new solutions to fight climate change and to decarbonize. And since these regulations are in place and since they are coming, they're very open to discuss our business model, our products, our potential solutions in helping them reduce their carbon footprint through better and more sustainable energy procurement.
Let's talk about your free seed funding, and congratulations to you that you got to 2.4 million euros in pre-seed stage. That's a very incredible success. But what exactly the promise or assurance that you give to the investors through your business plan?
Yeah. So I think it's important to mention that what investors want to see, or what investors are hoping to see for the next months after they, or the next year and a half or two, whatever your runway is, after they make that investment, that really depends on the stage that you're in and also the type of business model that you're building. It really makes a big difference whether investors invest at pre-seed stage or whether they invest at seed or series A. If professional investors invest at pre-seed stage, then they know that the company is very early. And depending on the business model and the sector that they're in, they are aware that it might not be more than an idea. In our specific case, we had a very clear vision of what we wanted to build. We had an MVP of our product, but that was mostly it. They invested on this vision in this really big market that they believed in is ripe for disruption, that they believe is an important market and a challenging environment, and they really wanted to make a bet and to invest into Trawa as a potential to see if we can disrupt the green energy market. And so our investors want to see over the course of the next 1.5 to 2 years, until we would potentially raise the next round, they want to see us go from idea and MVP stage to actually working with the first customers, potentially working the first revenue, having built a product that goes live, that customers love and that they are excited about, and for us to take our first steps towards commercialization. And then in the next round in seed, what we would likely do is we would likely show that we have product market fit or the first signs of product market fit, that we have been able to convince first customers, ideally that first customers love our solution, and that there is a real market for what we're building. And then in the seed round with the new money in 1.5 to 2 years, then we would really invest into growth. So you asked about what they saw. I think they just saw a lot of potential. I think they saw a lot of potential in the space. They saw a lot of potential in the idea, but they most likely also saw a lot of potential in us as a team, that we have the competencies to find our way around this complicated market. Because most companies that start at pre-seed stage, they have to pivot a few times. The business model will change, but if they believe in the team and their capabilities, I think that's really what gave them the conviction.
Yeah, I saw some of startup companies actually have brilliant idea and they have huge potential of success of their business idea, but they lack competencies. They build a very bad team, but that's really hinders them to be successful. It is good to know that you mentioned you have good competencies people in your team and you have very high potential of business market, and you are directly hitting the point at this time in Europe, the energy sector. That's really, really interesting to see. And how long you been working on this idea?
Roughly a year now. So we started in early 2022, ideation process, and then of course it took a few months before it got this specific. But I would say roughly a year.
Okay, okay. So I want to bring some of the hard decision that you took over this year. Was there any situation that you really get frustrated with your idea or with the team or some other kind of issues? Can you highlight two or three issues?
Yeah, so the ideation phase, or at least I always call it the ideation phase, where you're spending a lot of time, months, and some people even years, really building expertise in a sector, and playing around with different business ideas and then testing those business ideas with potential customers. That can be really frustrating. And we also, as a team, we did this for many months, where we would identify business opportunities and business ideas, and we would specify them, and then we would go out and speak to potential customers and experts. And sometimes, after working on a specific idea for 8 weeks at a time, we would then decide, you know what, this is not it. And then you have to can that idea. You have to just start from scratch. And that can obviously be really frustrating, because you pour your heart and your soul and days and nights into working on that idea. And then at some point, you have to be rational and critical about it, and just say, you know what, we haven't been able to build the necessary conviction. You toss it away. And the next morning, you have to sit down at the desk or within the team, and you just have to start from scratch or take another idea. And I think that is just a psychological stress that is also tough to manage, right? You need to stay motivated. You need to not give up, because no one wakes up all of a sudden and has that amazing idea. I mean, maybe a few people have that eureka moment, but I would say it's very rare. Most people, they just work on something, they recognize this is not it, and then they continue working on something else. And I think having that perseverance, having that motivation, and that strength to keep on going, especially if you reach a low light and a stop, I think that's really critical, and that's an important turning point.
As part of your business, what kind of partners you want to engage in the future to expand your business?
Yeah, so for us, as we're really building an end-to-end energy provider that is going to be able to cater to the needs of commercial and industrial companies, there are a lot of partners that we'll need. So in the beginning of the process, if we think about customer acquisition, there will be a lot of distribution partners that we can work with. So these could be a lot of different types of customers, acquisition partners, but one thing that we could be working on with is energy consultants. There are many different types of energy consultants, especially in the B2B space. But some of these energy consultants have a very close relationship to these B2B customers. They help them with all types of questions around on-site assets, but they also would help them find an appropriate energy procurement contract. And so if we would work with these people, that could really be beneficial for the customers, the energy consultant, but also for us. But then also, if we move one step further along the value chain and we look at operational processes, there's a lot of partners that we'll need. We'll need partners that help provide spot trading for us, algorithmic, for example. That's not necessarily something that we'll want to build ourselves. But then there are also a lot of different service providers within the energy industry that we're going to have to acquire. And then, of course, if we look at supply within the energy industry, that's also something where we'll have to work with a lot of providers. So independent power producers, for example, companies and individuals that own solar or wind parks and farms, that is also a really important partner, someone where we can obtain the energy that we'll then actually have to supply to our customers. It's a lot of there's a lot of partners that we'll need.
And regarding partnership with energy suppliers, do you think is easy or difficult to collaborate with them at this point of time as a startup company?
So for the for the next 2 years, we're going to be very busy on a lot of different frontiers. In terms of customer and growth, we're gonna try to work with the first customers on actually delivering their electricity and on having them use our product, which means obviously that a prerequisite is that we start building a product that actually works. We have a prototype, but we need to take it a lot further to actually employ it at our customer site and to have our customers use it and to love it. And then in terms of team, we're not hiring a lot of roles in the next 12 to 18 months, but obviously we'll be hiring a few key people. And so I think those are some of the most important tasks that we are working on. Operationally, there are going to be some licenses that we need to get in order to really fulfill the value proposition that we have, like an energy utility license is just an example, but we're working on that and we're pretty confident that that will work.
Right, right. And in the next phase, you're also planning to hire some of the expert people to your company, right? So what kind of so so what kind of expertise you are looking for?
So for the next 2 years, we're going to be very busy on a lot of different frontiers. In terms of customer and growth, we're gonna try to work with the first customers on actually delivering their electricity and on having them use our product, which means obviously that a prerequisite is that we start building a product that actually works. We have a prototype, but we need to take it a lot further to actually employ it at our customer site and to have our customers use it and to love it. And then in terms of team, we're not hiring a lot of roles in the next 12 to 18 months, but obviously we'll be hiring a few key people. And so I think those are some of the most important tasks that we are working on. Operationally, there are going to be some licenses that we need to get in order to really fulfill the value proposition that we have, like an energy utility license is just an example, but we're working on that and we're pretty confident that that will work. So once the product is more advanced and we'll move from beta customers to actually selling our product and to scaling sales and growth, we'll definitely look towards hiring some experts in the B2B energy industry, people that have multiple years of experience selling energy products to commercial industrial customers. That's definitely something that we'll need. I'm not necessarily sure whether this is a sales consultant or whether this might even be head of sales at that point. That depends on how fast we scale growth. And so we'll definitely hire someone there in terms of sales consultancy or a sales agent, and then also around about key account management, depending on how many customers we're able to close in what time. But I think that's one area where we'll definitely need some expertise.
Right, right. And you're also planning to expand to other European countries.
Well, of course, at some point in time, but for the next 24 months, I'm quite confident that we'll stay within Germany. The German market is really quite large. It makes up a quite significant percentage of the European commercial and industrial electricity spend. And so, the electricity market, it's not like, just scaling a direct to consumer app, for example, from one country to the other, where you essentially just need to translate the app and then you're good to go. The problem that we're solving, improving the way that companies buy electricity, we're very confident that that is an issue and a real problem that customers have in all types of countries. But the German market is more than large enough to sustain our growth for the next 24 months at least.
Right, right. So you have been working on many startup companies, and now you have the very ambitious business idea and companies going on. So what has been the most rewarding aspects in your entrepreneurial journey? What what satisfies you?
So I think both in my entrepreneurial journey, but also in the career that I had before, working for different startups, but also working even as a management consultant, as an employee, has always been solving hard problems. So anything that is difficult, that is challenging, that really intrigues me and that gets me excited. So if we work on any real problem that the organization or that the customers are facing, even back when I was working at Bain and we were just hired consultants to solve a problem for the customer, that is something that I always really liked. There are a lot of people that are very critical of management consultants, and I think a lot of the critique that these people have might be spot on. But at the end of the day, you're still oftentimes working on real hard problems that the C-level management has and that they are struggling with to solve themselves. And I feel like there are a lot of similarities between doing that and working as an entrepreneur or working as an employee for another entrepreneur, and those have always been the most rewarding tasks. For example, at wefox, when we were working on the one insurance back then, there was this vision of building this end-to-end digital insurance company, but there were just hundreds of problems to solve along the way. And it was really rewarding to work over months with a team of really great people on all these different frontiers, like design or the onboarding journey or the legal issues around signing an insurance contract digitally that would then actually be legally binding. So to see how hard challenges can be solved through a lot of tough work, and then to see how things come together, that has always been what really drove me.
So, what kind of suggestions that you would give to people who really want to start a business or have some ideas of starting a business?
I think if you're motivated to start a company, that's fantastic. And depending on where they are in their stage, it really makes a difference on what they should be doing. I think if you can surround yourself with people that have a similar mindset, that have a network themselves, that is one thing that can be really beneficial. And whether that means going to a business school for an MBA or for a master's degree, depending on where you are in your career, or whether that means potentially leaving a corporate job to go work in Berlin for a young company, anything where you have the chance to surround yourself with like-minded people, grow your entrepreneurial network, and make connections, that can be beneficial. Just surround yourself with people that can help you, that are positive, that can help you discuss ideas, that can support you by connecting you to experts. I think that is the most important thing that you can do. If you sit around behind your desk in an environment where no one else has the interest or passion for entrepreneurship or is willing to discuss things with you, then it's going to be kind of tough to actually move from it's my idea or it's my wish to become an entrepreneur to actually doing it.
Thank you, David, sir, for your valuable information and your experience, your suggestions, and talks about your company. That's incredible information, and I'm very happy to have you on my podcast. And I hope my listeners and viewers really inspires with your information and get something from this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Prasanna. I really enjoyed it too.